April 16, 1947. The morning dawned clear and crisp over Texas City, cooled by a brisk north wind blowing in from the Gulf of Mexico. Just before 8 a.m., longshoremen removed the hatch covers on Hold 4 of the French Liberty ship SS Grandcamp as they prepared to load the final 600 tons of ammonium nitrate fertilizer destined for war-ravaged France. The ship was already carrying 2,300 tons of the chemical compound, along with large balls of sisal twine, peanuts, drilling equipment, tobacco, cotton, and a few cases of small ammunition. No special safety precautions were in place. The explosive properties of ammonium nitrate were not yet commonly known, and the longshoremen descended into the hold to wait for the pallets holding the 100-pound packages to be hoisted from dockside. None of them knew they had less than 2 hours to live. The first sign of trouble came just after 8 a.m. when someone smelled smoke. A plume was observed rising between the cargo holds and the ship's hull, apparently about 7 or 8 layers down in the stacked fertilizer bags. Longshoremen grabbed a gallon jug of water and 2 fire extinguishers, but they had no effect. The cargo hold filled with dense, brilliantly colored smoke that could be seen all over town. Captain Charles de Guillebon, the ship's master, made a fateful decision. Concerned about damaging the cargo with water, he ordered the hatches battened down and instructed the crew to pump steam into the hold to smother the flames. This decision would prove catastrophic. By sealing the hold, the captain created a pressure cooker. The temperature inside began to rise rapidly as the ammonium nitrate underwent thermal decomposition, transforming from a stable fertilizer into an unstable explosive compound. By 8:30 a.m., the situation had deteriorated dramatically. The smoke pouring from the Grandcamp had turned from white to yellowish brown, then to dark orange and red. The metal sides of the ship were hot to the touch. Someone finally called the Texas City Volunteer Fire Department. All 27 members of the department responded, along with firefighters from Texas City Heights. They arrived at the dock and began laying hose lines, connecting their pumpers to nearby hydrants. But the ship was already so hot that water vaporized on contact with its hull. Chief Fred Dowdy and his men faced an impossible situation. Fires at the docks were fairly common in Texas City, and a crowd of curious onlookers had gathered at the head of the slip to watch the firefighters work. Some brought their children. Workers from the nearby Monsanto Chemical Company plant, located just 300 feet from the ship, came out to watch the spectacle. At 9:12 a.m., the ammonium nitrate reached its explosive threshold. The exact trigger remains unknown, but the most likely explanation is that the heat of the fire caused the fuel oil bunker adjacent to Hold 4 to split, pouring fuel onto the hot, decomposing fertilizer and creating an impromptu explosive mixture. What happened next defied comprehension. The Grandcamp disintegrated in an explosion heard 150 miles away. A huge mushroom cloud billowed more than 2,000 feet into the morning air. The shockwave knocked 2 small planes flying overhead out of the sky, killing both pilots instantly. The cargo, 2,300 tons of ammonium nitrate, along with bales of twine, peanuts, and equipment, was hurled 2,000 to 3,000 feet into the air. Fireballs streaked across the sky like meteors, visible for miles across Galveston Bay. The blast created total destruction within 2,000 feet and extreme damage throughout the port. A 15-foot tsunami was thrust from the slip by the force of the explosion, sweeping a large steel barge ashore and carrying dead and injured workers back into the turning basin as it receded. Blast overpressure and heat instantly disintegrated the bodies of all the firefighters and the ship's crew still aboard. Chief Fred Dowdy and 26 of his 27 volunteer firefighters were killed instantly, along with 3 of the 4 Texas City Heights volunteer firefighters. A thick curtain of steel shards scythed through workers along the docks and the crowd of onlookers who had gathered to watch. Fragments of the Grandcamp, some weighing several tons, showered down throughout the port and town for several minutes, extending the range of casualties far beyond the immediate blast zone. At the Monsanto Chemical Company plant across the slip, 145 of 450 shift workers perished. The entire facility was obliterated. Safety engineer Robert Sutherland and his fire department crew had been laying hose lines to Monsanto's dock area when the explosion occurred. They had connected their 500-gallon pumper to a hydrant in a yard between 2 large brick and steel buildings, about 2 city blocks from the Grandcamp. When the blast hit, those 2 buildings simply ceased to exist, and the pumper was picked up and thrown 200 feet through the air. The sheer power of the explosion was felt as far away as Louisiana. People on the street in Galveston, 10 miles away, were thrown to the pavement, and glass storefronts shattered. Buildings swayed in Baytown, 15 miles to the north. In Texas City itself, doors were ripped from their facings, houses toppled off their foundations, and broken glass filled the air. The Grandcamp explosion triggered a chain reaction of secondary disasters. Burning debris rained down across the industrial waterfront, igniting refineries and chemical storage tanks. Falling bales of burning twine from the ship's cargo set fires throughout the city. Oil tanks burst into flames. The ship's 1.5-ton anchor was hurled 2 miles from the blast site. At the time of the Grandcamp explosion, 2 other vessels were docked nearby, the SS High Flyer and the Wilson B. Keene, both American cargo ships. The High Flyer was carrying 961 tons of ammonium nitrate and 1,800 tons of sulfur. Burning debris from the first explosion set the High Flyer's cargo ablaze. Her crew stayed aboard for an hour before the smoke and fire forced them to abandon ship. In the afternoon, 2 men boarded the vessel searching for injured crew members and discovered that her cargo was ablaze. As night fell, Texas City resembled a war zone. The first explosion had destroyed all of the city's firefighting equipment, including 4 trucks, and killed nearly all its firefighters. Water and power were knocked out. There was no operational hospital in Texas City. Volunteers converted City Hall and the Chamber of Commerce building into makeshift infirmaries, while the wounded were evacuated to hospitals in Galveston and Houston. Around 11 p.m., tugboats attempted to pull the burning High Flyer away from the docks. They managed to cut her anchor, but something, possibly wreckage from the Grandcamp, had wedged the ship in place. Despite their efforts, they couldn't move her more than 100 feet. The tugboat crews fled the area around 1 a.m. on April 17th. 10 minutes later, at 1:10 a.m., the High Flyer exploded in a blast witnesses described as even more powerful than the Grandcamp. The second explosion compounded the already catastrophic damage. In what witnesses described as resembling a fireworks display, incandescent chunks of steel that had been the ship arched high into the night sky and fell over a wide radius, starting numerous fires. The blast demolished the nearby Wilson B. Keene and destroyed grain elevators and piers. Crude oil tanks that had survived the first explosion burst into flames, and a chain reaction spread fires to structures previously spared. When dawn arrived, large columns of thick black smoke were visible 30 miles away, hovering over Texas City for days until the fires gradually burned out or were extinguished by exhausted firefighting crews. Casualty estimates came to a total of 567 deaths, though some historians believe the true number approached 600. More than 3,000 people were injured. Property damage exceeded 1,000 buildings, with financial losses estimated at $67 million in 1947 dollars, equivalent to nearly $1 billion today. The Texas City disaster prompted a massive relief effort. Governor Buford Jester issued a proclamation coordinating state aid and closing all roads into Texas City, except for rescue and relief personnel. The U.S. Army flew in blood plasma, gas masks, food, and supplies, provided bulldozers to clear wreckage, and set up temporary housing at Camp Wallace in Hitchcock. The Red Cross, Salvation Army, Boy and Girl Scouts, and thousands of volunteers provided first aid, food, water, and comfort to survivors. Sam Maceo, one of two brothers who ran organized crime in Galveston, organized a large benefit featuring entertainers, including Phil Harris, Frank Sinatra, and Ann Sheridan. The Texas City Relief Fund ultimately raised more than $1 million. The disaster led to sweeping changes in chemical safety regulations. New rules required ammonium nitrate to be stored at cool temperatures in specialized containers, prohibited storage near other reactive materials, discouraged long-distance transport, and greatly restricted overseas shipping. It sparked a more proactive approach to industrial disaster planning nationwide. More than 3,000 lawsuits were filed against the United States government, since the ammonium nitrate had originated in U.S. ordnance plants in Iowa and Nebraska. The litigation dragged on for years. In 1956, a special act of Congress settled all claims for $16.5 million. In 1962, the Supreme Court refused to review an appeals court ruling that the Republic of France, owner of the Grandcamp, could not be held liable. By 1950, temporary housing had been built, and docks, warehouses, and chemical plants were being rebuilt. Major companies that had lost facilities announced plans not only to rebuild, but to expand their operations in Texas City. In June 1947, the bodies of the unidentified dead were buried together in a memorial cemetery and park. Today, the scarred propeller from the SS High Flyer sits at the entrance to the port of Texas City as a reminder of that terrible day. A historical marker commemorates the disaster, and in 1991, a new section was added to the memorial park. The Texas City disaster remains the deadliest industrial accident in American history, a catastrophic reminder of the hidden dangers lurking in seemingly ordinary cargo and the devastating consequences when safety protocols fail.